year, a new generation of Poco mid-rangers, and today we'll be talking about the Poco X5 Pro. It brings some improvements over the previous model, including a more powerful chipset, so could this be your next mid-range phone? I'm Will for GSM Arena, and let's find out in our Poco X5 Pro review. The Poco X5 Pro brings many of the same features as last year's Poco X4 Pro, but makes some important changes too. One shortcoming of the previous model was that the chipset was a big downgrade from the model before that, which actually had flagship-grade silicon. We're not up to flagship level this time around, but we get a pretty competitive Snapdragon 778G. That means better gaming performance and the return of 4K video recording. The design has also been toned down a little bit. Previously, there was a sort of holographic gradient going on with the finish. With the X5 Pro, you get the same size and shape, and both the back panel and frame are again made of plastic. But the finish is now monocolored and matte, and the glass part of the camera bump is smaller. The display is similar to what we've seen before. It's a 6.67-inch OLED with a 1080p resolution, a 120Hz refresh rate, and Gorilla Glass 5 protection. But what's new this time around is that you get 10-bit color depth, and support for Dolby Vision as well as HDR10. Content looks good here, with great contrast, and the color reproduction is accurate too. We had no complaints as far as screen brightness is concerned. We measured a maximum of nearly 500 nits with the manual slider, and this boosts up to over 900 nits in auto mode in bright conditions. When it comes to the high refresh rate, you get the 120Hz to smooth things out when you're swiping and scrolling, and unlike last year, this can dial down to 60 when idling to save energy. For audio, you get a standard headphone jack and a pair of stereo speakers with Dolby Atmos support. Their loudness is very good, and the sound quality is very good too, rich and punchy. Just like last year, there's a side-mounted fingerprint reader built into the power button. It's quite fast and reliable. One feature that has gone missing though is expandable storage, but you can get the X5 Pro with 128 or 256 gigs on board. The interface is one we haven't seen before. It's Xiaomi's new MIUI 14, based on Android 12. Compared to MIUI 13, you get improvements in optimization, and the system is supposed to have a lighter footprint, leaving more space for your media and apps. But at the time of this review, here you're actually missing most of MIUI 14's unique new features, which were unveiled for the Chinese launch of the UI. Instead, you get a pretty familiar Poco-flavored Xiaomi software experience. Your notification shade is split into a separate notification center and control center. And you get your typical two-column task switcher, from which you can launch apps in a split screen or floating window. Of course, you get proprietary Xiaomi apps for your multimedia, and there's also an app which allows you to use the phone as a remote control, since it features an IR blaster. Unlike on other Xiaomi phones, the app drawer on the Poco is always active. You don't have the option of keeping all of the apps on the home screen. And while there is something like an always-on display, it won't stay always on. It'll light up for just 10 seconds after you tap the screen. Now let's talk about the chipset, which I introduced earlier. It's a Qualcomm Snapdragon 778G 5G, built on a 6nm process. It's one of the most powerful chipsets you can get in a mid-ranger, outside of flagship-grade silicon, and it's a considerable upgrade over the Snapdragon 695 in last year's model. The performance is excellent for the class, and the phone can handle demanding tasks and heavy games. Plus, the thermal management is great too. The Poco X5 Pro has a 5000 mAh battery, and the battery life is solid here. The phone earned an endurance rating of 113 hours in our proprietary tests. You also get a 67-watt charger in the box, and the charging speed is quite fast. We were able to top up the phone from 0 to 82% in half an hour. The Poco X5 Pro has the same camera setup as the previous model, a 108-megapixel main cam, an 8-megapixel ultra-wide, and a 2-megapixel macro camera. But with the new chipset, the image processing should be different, and you also get support for 4K video recording. The main camera saves 12-megapixel photos by default, and these turn out good for the class. They have lively colors, likable dynamic range, excellent contrast, and low noise. The detail level is above average too. However, its rendition isn't ideal. When you zoom in, complex details like foliage are often either smeared or over-sharpened. There is a 2x zoom toggle on the viewfinder, and the zoom is achieved through cropping and upscaling. The detail level isn't great, but the rest of the quality matches those of the 1x zoom photos. Portrait photos are decent, with good separation and the subjects are well exposed. 8 megapixel photos from the ultra-wide cam are decent. They have enough detail, realistic colors, and low noise. The contrast is a bit average, and so is the dynamic range. 2 megapixel close-up photos from the macro cam aren't very good. The detail level is poor, and the photos are noisy and over-sharpened. If you're shooting with the main cam in low light conditions, the Poco X5 Pro can automatically apply night mode processing. These photos are likable. They're well exposed, with good color saturation, plenty of detail, and great contrast and dynamic range. You can also toggle on a night mode manually. It uses a slightly longer exposure time, so you may end up with a brighter result. The photos taken without night mode enabled are also good. They're a bit softer and darker with a more narrow dynamic range, but the look is more realistic. The color saturation is still good, and the noise level is tolerable. The auto night mode doesn't do anything for the ultra-wide cam, and by default the photos are just usable, with soft detail and limited dynamic range, but alright colors. You can toggle on the manual night mode and it provides a much better rendition, with better detail, color saturation, contrast, and dynamic range. Selfies taken with the 16 megapixel front-facing cam are good. The detail level won't blow you away, but the colors, contrast, and dynamic range are respectable. You can shoot 4K video at 30 FPS with the main camera, and the quality is great. There's a lot of detail and balanced sharpening. The colors, contrast, and dynamic range are nice too, and electronic stabilization is always on. 1080p videos shot with the ultra-wide cam are decent. There's enough detail for this resolution and accurate colors. The contrast and dynamic range are alright. So that's the Poco X5 Pro. It's quite a competitive phone in its class, with a powerful mid-range chipset and solid cameras. The OLED display is great, and we like the stereo speakers too. Plus you get good battery life and fast charging. Overall, there isn't much to complain about here, and if you're looking for a feature-packed mid-ranger, the X5 Pro deserves a recommendation. Thanks for watching, guys. If you'd like to check out some alternatives to the Poco X5 Pro, you can start off with the Moto G82. Another option is the Samsung Galaxy A53. Let us know what you guys think, and I'll see you on the next one.